Hello everyone, this is Pushpoint, and I am your storyteller. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. Like the video and subscribe the channel.
After where are you from and what time you are watching now, get comfortable and relax. Story 1. Stillwater. It was a town not on any map, a place swallowed by time and memory. Catherine had been driving all night through winding country roads, trying to outrun a grief too large for one heart. The rain had started mid-evening, steady and unending, blurring the highway signs and swallowing the sound of her tires in a ceaseless murmur. Her GPS blinked out hours ago, the screen flickering once before going black. There were no lights ahead, no phone signal, only the road and the rain. Then Stillwater, a small green sign barely visible through the mist read. Stillwater population. The number had been scrubbed off. Catherine hesitated. Her gas gauge hovered just above empty, and sleep scratched at her eyes. She turned down the lane toward the village. Stillwater sat in a bowl of forested hills, wrapped in fog. The streets were narrow and cobbled, lined with Victorian-style homes, their windows dark and staring. A single inn stood at the center, its faded wooden sign swinging in the rain. The Ashmere House. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and something else, something older. The man at the desk was pale and silent, his eyes dark and unreadable. "You'll want room 3, he said without checking a book or computer. Top of the stairs. Fires lit." Catherine nodded, too tired to question it. The room was small and cold, though a fire did crackle in the hearth. The wallpaper peeled in places, revealing older designs beneath. A large mirror faced the bed, its surface clouded with age. The rain tapped rhythmically against the glass panes. She tried to sleep, but the dreams came quickly, wet and full of whispers. She woke sometime in the night, heart pounding. The fire had died, yet the room was warm. The mirror, something about the mirror was wrong. She stared. In the reflection, the room looked normal, but her reflection was missing. Just the empty bed, the door, the flickering hearth. She turned, she was still there. Her arms, her breath. She moved a hand. Nothing moved in the glass. The mirror was lying. She left the room to find the man at the desk, but the hallways twisted strangely, longer than before. The wallpaper changed different designs in every corridor. Gas lamps hissed quietly. Behind one door, she heard soft sobbing. Another, the sound of water dripping too slow, too loud. She turned a corner and came face to face with her reflection. Not a mirror herself, standing, soaked, barefoot, eyes hollow. It smiled and vanished. Catherine ran, but the inn had changed. The staircases curved impossibly, the doors repeating endlessly. She burst through one and found herself back in room 3. The fire was roaring again. The mirror was clear. Her reflection had returned, but it wasn't moving. It just watched, frozen in a smile. The next morning, there was no rain. The sky was grey but silent. She found herself in the bed, dry and fully clothed. The mirror reflected her normally. The fire was out. She packed quickly. Downstairs, the inn was empty. Dust covered the desk. Cobwebs stretched from the chandelier. A faded newspaper lay on the floor. In fire claims 7 Ashmere House closed indefinitely. The date was 30 years ago. Catherine ran outside. The streets were empty. The buildings were crumbling ruins. Stillwater was dead. Gone. She drove until the fuel gave out and flagged down a trucker miles away. When she turned to point behind her, there was no road, no village, just trees. She never spoke of Stillwater again, but sometimes on rainy nights, she dreams of the inn, of mirrors, and of a version of herself, still trapped behind the glass watching, waiting. Story 2. The archivist's room. It was an unspoken rule in the library's eastern wing. Never open the last door on the 3rd floor. Sylvia took the job because it was quiet. After years in the city, she welcomed the silence of Barrow Hollow, a moss-draped town in the hills, tucked between veils of rain and dense pine. The Barrow Public Library was ancient, built of dark brick and iron-framed windows, its upper floors almost entirely unused. She was told her job was simple: catalogue and digitize the collection. And this was stressed: do not enter room 313. They said it was condemned. Structural instability. No one had used it in decades. But from her desk below, She sometimes heard the creak of floorboards above.
Like footsteps, then nothing.
Just the hush of rain pressing against the tall windows.
The hallway to room 313 was always colder. The fluorescence above flickered more there, buzzing faintly. On her second week, she noticed something strange. A cart of books would appear outside 313 every Thursday, even though she never saw who left them.
Ancient volumes, many without titles, just symbols and runes burned into the leather. They were never in the catalogue. One Thursday, curiosity overcame her.
She followed the cart to the door.
It was plain darker wood than the others, fitted with a lock rusted over.
She pressed her ear to it, breathing, slow, wet.
From the other side,
She recoiled,
but then it stopped. Nothing but her own pulse.
That night, Sylvia dreamt the room of a tall man in robes made of paper, whispering through torn pages, ink dripping from his sleeves like blood.
Behind him, shelves stretched endlessly into shadow.
In the dream, she was standing at the door, a key in her hand.
The next morning, she found an old glass key in her locker.
No note, no explanation.
Room 313.
The lock gave way easily, as if it had only been pretending to resist. The door groaned open into darkness. She stepped inside. The smell of mildew and parchment was thick.
The room was larger than she expected.
Too large. The ceiling arched like the nave of a cathedral, lined with carvings, scripts in dead languages, some pulsing faintly when she looked directly at them. Shelves curved impossibly along the walls.
Every book was a mark.
Silent. At the far end stood a massive desk, and behind it, a high-backed chair.
Facing away, she turned to leave, but the door had vanished. Only bookshelves now, stretching in all directions.
And then
the chair creaked.
It turned.
Nothing sat in it.
But the pages on the desk stirred, as if something had just risen and stepped away. She was not alone. The air grew heavy.
Pages began to whisper words forming without sound.
Sylvia stumbled back, knocking a book to the floor. It fell open.
Her name was scrawled across the pages.
Over and over, in different handwriting, different languages. She ran.
Through rows of shelves, deeper into the impossible room.
Lights flickered, some glowing from within the spines of books,
others from cracks in the floor.
No matter how far she went, the chair remained just behind her, as though the room shifted to follow.
Eventually, she collapsed against a wall, gasping. Her breath left her in a visible mist, and the pages of a nearby book fluttered.
A voice, like parchment tearing, filled the air. The archivist chooses. Then silence. When she woke, she was outside room 313.
The door was locked.
The cart of books was gone.
She quit that day.
But sometimes, when rain taps against her windows in just the right rhythm, she hears whispers in the sound.
Pages turning, shelves stretching.
She dreams of books with no names, of that room behind a door that no longer exists.
And each time she dreams, she wakes to find a new book on her shelf, each one closer to the end. Story 3. The Fork Station.
They told Avor the lighthouse was automated.
No keeper,
no residents, just a remote signal tower, pulsing out warnings to distant ships from a coast no longer charted. But when she arrived at station W12, soaked from the ferry ride and the endless drizzle that clung to the island like a second skin, she found the lightkeeper's quarters fully intact, recently lived in, a kettle on the stove,
a mud hearth full of black tea, still warm.
No sign of the ferry crew, no return ticket, just her and the station.
The fork never lifted. It clung to the cliffs, curling over jagged rocks and half-drowned pines.
Avor had come to record wildlife sounds for a research grant,
but the calls of seabirds were muted, and the microphones picked up only one thing.
A low, rhythmic tone, like a fork horn, but wrong, off-key, organic. She checked the main tower. The machinery was ancient but running, coming low.
Yet the actual light hadn't turned in weeks.
A layer of dust coated the bulb's outer lens.
It hadn't emitted a beam in some time.
And yet, every night, Avor saw the glow from her window.
A pale, steady arc swinging over the sea.
She set up her recording equipment. The fork made everything damp.
Her laptop lagged, and every file she uploaded seemed to degrade, corrupted with static and whispers she hadn't heard while recording. At night, She heard movement above.
A thudding, slow and deliberate, from the spiral stair that led to the light. One night, she climbed it.
Step by creaking step, she ascended the tower, flashlight flickering. When she reached the top, the light was off.
Dead, the bulb shattered.
Dust everywhere.
No sign of anyone.
But when she looked out the glass, she saw a figure standing far below on the cliffs.
It was barefoot, tall.
The face turned upward, though she couldn't see it through the fog. Her breath hitched.
The figure didn't move.
Then it walked toward the sea, not the path,
not the stairs,
straight over the edge.
Gone. The next morning, Avor checked the radio. Static.
Only once did she hear something just for a few seconds. A woman's voice. Still here.
Under the fog. Don't let it in. She tried to leave.
Followed the footpath down to the dock. The ferry was gone.
No boat. Only waves. The air pressure shifted that night. The wind stopped.
The fog became heavier.
Thicker.
She dreamt of tunnels.
Hollow spaces beneath the island, full of breathing stone and long stairways that spiraled downward.
A door made of salt.
And something knocking soft, patient.
She awoke to find water poured beneath the door.
The next day, her equipment stopped working. No light, no heat. The foghorn groaned every 12 minutes on its own. Her food spoiled rapidly. Even the congoods, mice, began appearing in corners. Their eyes clouded, their bodies unmoving. But worst of all, footprints. Not hers. Barefoot. Wet.
Leading from the spiral stairs to her bed. She found a journal hidden behind the tool locker, wrapped in cloth, dated 2 years earlier. I thought I was alone.
But it watches when the fog comes in.
It wears your face before it takes you.
The last thing you see is yourself walking into the sea.
The pages ended with a simple line.
The fog isn't weather.
It's hunger. She didn't sleep the night.
The storm came at dusk.
Wind shook the tower.
The horn blasted louder than ever, echoing inside her skull.
She barricaded the door. But sometime in the night, the light came on, slowly sweeping,
pulsing through the fog. She stared up at it from the base of the tower and saw herself already inside.
Looking back down, the door behind her opened. Avor was never found.
The grant expired. The station went offline.
They say the fog never clears from W12 now.
And if you tune a radio on the cliffs just right, you'll hear the horn.
And a whisper between the static.
Don't let it in.
Story 4. Follow Roots. It began with the letter yellow, handwritten, bearing no return address.
Eleanor received it 3 days after her mother's funeral. A simple message. The house in Witherbrook is yours now,
but you must return before the third rain. She hadn't thought about the house in decades. Her crumbling estate tucked deep in a forgotten part of the countryside, where her grandmother used to speak to trees and sort every window. The memories were half-formed.
A cracked porcelain doll. The smell of wet earth whispers in the walls.
Eleanor drove out reluctantly, through rural roads that narrowed until the branches scraped the windows. The rain had started soft at first, then heavier.
By the time she reached the overgrown gate, it was impossible to tell if it was night or simply storm dark.
Blackthorn House had not aged well.
Ivy choked the chimney.
Windows sagged in their frames.
But the door was unlocked, and the lights worked. Though she hadn't paid for power in years,
the inside was preserved in time.
Dust coated everything, but nothing had been disturbed. Her childhood toys sat neatly on the shelves, their glassy eyes dim. The old wallpaper green with curling vines had begun to peel, revealing darker, older paper beneath.
That night, the rain came in steady sheets,
and Eleanor heard scratching in the walls.
At first, she blamed animals,
but it followed her, room to room. The next day, she explored the attic.
She found them there, the roots.
Thick, dark strands growing through the boards.
Not vines,
roots.
Burrowing from the rafters down into the walls.
Some pulsed faintly, as though carrying water or something else. She followed them.
Down through the floors.
Into the cellar.
A room her grandmother always kept locked.
The air was wet and fetid, filled with the scent of rotting leaves. The roots were everywhere here, cracking through stone and brick, some wrapped around old furniture, others disappearing into a pit in the center of the floor.
And above the pit, a wooden frame, an empty noose hanging from it.
On the wall beside it, a single phrase had been carved again and again.
It takes the blood to stay asleep.
She ran.
Outside, the storm had worsened.
Trees bowed in the wind, but she could hear something louder than the wind.
A voice,
Low and ragged, chanting from beneath the soil. That night, Eleanor dreamt the hollow tree, a towering oak with a wound in its trunk, oozing black sap. From inside, it came shaped men and women, their faces split open, soil spilling from their mouths. And in the center, her grandmother, eyes full of ash.
"You have the root in you," she said. "You never left."
Not really. Eleanor woke to find her hands covered in mud.
Bare footprints tracked from the cellar stairs to her bed. Her skin itched. Beneath it, something moved.
The third rain came, and the house changed.
The wallpaper peeled itself away.
The windows darkened,
The air grew thick with sap and rot.
and the walls began to breathe. She heard whispers from the roots, in voices not her own.
They called her name. They welcomed her back.
By morning, she was gone. Only the muddy footprints remained leading back to the cellar, down into the pit.
The house still stands in Witherbrook.
Locals won't go near it.
They say the roots whisper if you get too close.
And on stormy nights, a light flickers in the attic. Some say Eleanor is still there, feeding it.
Story 5. The room across the hall.
It had been 20 years since Marcus had stepped into the Briarhill retirement home. The building had changed little, same institutional green walls, same antiseptic smell, same persistent drizzle tapping against the long, narrow windows.
He was only there because of a letter.
His father, Harold, long presumed dead, had been found alive, wandering the old quarry road outside of town.
He hadn't aged a day.
No identification, no explanation, just the name, Harold Blythe.
A match to Marcus's missing father. But it couldn't be him.
His father had vanished in 1985, when Marcus was 9, and this man looked exactly the same. They admitted Harold into room 217, a plain space near the end of the east hall. Marcus visited, cautiously at first. The man looked like his father, but moved wrong, spoke in stilted patterns, and his eyes.
Something was missing. No warmth, no memory.
Just stillness. On the third visit, Marcus brought an old photo album. The man flicked through it with too much care, his fingers trembling.
When he reached the photo of Marcus's childhood bedroom, he stopped.
Stared and whispered, "That door shouldn't be there." Marcus leaned closer. "Which door?" The man's eyes darkened. "The one across the hall."
Room 218. The door was always locked, unused, no records.
When Marcus asked the nurse, she waved it off.
Storage, I think.
No one's been in there for years. But Marcus had seen things movement under the door. A thin beam of light some nights. Footsteps where there should be silence.
That night, a storm rolled in. Power flickered.
Emergency lights cast the halls in a dull red glow.
Marcus returned. He had to see it.
The door to 218 was slightly open. Inside, the room was empty at first glance. Bed, chair,
A cracked mirror. But the air was wrong. Still, but heavy, like underwater pressure.
and the far wall, warped. Marcus stepped closer. It wasn't a wall at all. It was paper. Wallpaper stretched over something breathing.
He touched it.
The surface pulsed under his fingers.
Then came the knocking.
From behind it, soft, rhythmic.
3 knocks, then silence, then his voice.
"Marcus, let me out." He stumbled back.
The voice came again, clearer, familiar.
"They left me here. You left me here."
A tear opened in the wallpaper.
Something reached through grey, thin fingers.
Nails cracked.
Skin paper dry.
He slammed the door shut. Behind him, the hallway had changed.
Longer, lights dimmer. The doors repeating, over and over. Each number 218. His phone buzzed.
A new photo in his gallery. A picture of himself, standing inside room 218. Taken from behind.
They found Marcus the next morning, curled in the hallway, rambling about wallpaper and echoes. He didn't remember why he was there.
Didn't recognize his name. He was assigned to room 217.
Where the man who claimed to be Harold had disappeared vanished during the night.
No security footage. No witnesses.
Only a photo on the bed.
A picture of room 218. Its door open.
Empty. Waiting.
They don't use the East Hall anymore.
Too many reports.
Staff hear voices that mimic their own.
Doors open on their own. Some say if you pass room 218 during a storm, your reflection lags behind in the window.
They try to keep it locked, but something keeps unlocking it, and it always knocks 3 times. Story 6. Ashmere Fen.
The town of Ashmere hadn't appeared on maps in nearly 60 years, when Della, a postdoctoral researcher in folklore and abandoned settlements, stumbled across a hand-drawn boundary map from 1902. She was drawn in by the faded name and a peculiar note in the margin. No mail past Ashmere Fen.
Town sealed.
Avoid during wet season, which, by her luck, had just begun. The locals didn't talk about it. Those who remembered it at all gave vague warnings, something about the ground not holding and the crying reeds.
But she couldn't help herself.
She wanted to document the decay.
Ashmere wasn't far. A 2-hour drive and a half-mile walk through a choked, muddy trail.
By the time she reached the signpost Ashmere Hop 148 crossed out in red, the rain had started again. The town was preserved in the worst possible way, waterlogged, distilled, and perfectly silent. Buildings leaned like forgotten gravestones.
Moss clung to doorframes.
The ground was soft beneath her boots, not mud, but something looser.
Spongier. The Fen had reclaimed most of the lower houses.
Only the church and a few homes on the slope remained mostly dry. She chose one near the top for shelter. Inside, furniture was still arranged, half covered in mildew and dust. On the table, a teacup full of dried soil. In the hallway, muddy footprints that led upstairs, but not down.
She didn't follow them.
That night, the reeds whispered.
It was a sound that didn't carry on the wind, more like a pressure behind the ears.
Low, mournful,
almost words. When she played back her field recordings the next morning, the whispers were louder, clearer.
Don't forget us.
We sang for you.
The ground grew softer each day. By the third, she could see the outlines of structures beneath the waterline. Roofs just beneath the murk. Chimneys poking up like gravestones.
A child's swing drifted lazily back and forth from no wind at all. She found a church log in a waterproof tin under the altar. Its last entry, dated October 1958, read,
The last 12 chosen.
They go down tonight. May the roots hold.
The rest of the pages were torn out. She woke that night to the sound of weeping, just outside the door.
When she looked, there was nothing.
Just rain, mud, and a trail of bare footprints leading toward the fen. She followed them.
At the edge of the deepest part of the marsh, where even the fog refused to gather, she saw them just beneath the surface.
Faces, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide, milky, and blinking. They looked up at her. One face she recognized.
Her own. She ran back to the house. But everything had changed. Her recorder was gone. Her bag soaked.
Her field journal filled with writing. She didn't remember dense script in the looping hand, repeating the same phrase. The water remembers.
She hadn't slept.
Not really.
But when she closed her eyes, she dreamt of the townsfolk mudcake, with empty eyes and open mouths, whispering her name from beneath the floorboards, and always the same voice in the reeds. You came back.
You remember, on the 6th night, the house began to sink. Not fast, just a slow groan of shifting timbers, water pooling in the corners.
The wallpaper peeled like skin.
The teacup filled again, not with soil, but with dark water. She climbed to the attic. The footprints were there again, waiting.
They found her car months later, overgrown and swallowed by ivy.
The trail to Ashmere had disappeared beneath a new stretch of marshland. Only her field journal was recovered. On the last page, written in perfect, looping script.
The fen takes what it's owed,
and it never forgets.
Ashmere is gone.
But sometimes, near forgotten boglands and drowned valleys, you might see a roofline in the mist.
Or hear the reeds whispering in the wind, calling a name that isn't yours yet,
but might be.
Story 7. The guest ledger. The rain hadn't let up for 2 days when Caleb saw the sign. Welcome to the Briar in vacancy. He hadn't meant to stop. He was just passing through,
a wrong turn of Route 19.
Thence woods pressing in on both sides, the map on his phone looping back into itself. Then the inn emerged from the mist like a bruise on the landscape.
Victorian.
3 stories.
Grey, flaking paint and tall, narrow windows like watchful eyes.
Inside, it was warm, the kind of warm that feels stale. like it's been trapped too long. A woman at the front desk greeted him, middle-aged.
Pale, dressed like a photograph.
Checking in, Mr. Harper?
She asked.
Caleb frowned. He hadn't given his name, but she slid over a ledger with his name already written in looping cursive.
Room 3C. He took the key. Brass. Heavy.
Don't go above the 3rd floor, she added.
We don't open those rooms anymore.
The room was clean, but old. Wallpaper peeled at the edges. A portrait of a forest hung crooked above the bed. When he tried to adjust it, the nail snapped, and the painting fell, revealing another key taped to the wall behind it.
Room for A. He didn't ask about it, but that night he heard footsteps above him, slow,
Deliberate.
pacing back and forth.
He went to the front desk.
The woman was gone. In her place sat the ledger, open.
New names had appeared, over a dozen, each one written in the same hand.
All in the past 48 hours. The last name was his again. Room for A.
He hadn't signed that.
The next day,
Caleb tried to leave. His car was gone.
not stolen, just gone. The gravel lot stretched out behind the inn, untouched, empty, except for a line of identical footprints leading back to the front door.
He called the police,
The line rang.
then answered. His own voice came through. I wouldn't go up there. Then silence.
The call timer blinked.
Oh, that night, the footsteps grew louder. He couldn't sleep. His window reflected the hallway, even when the curtain was closed.
He opened the drawer in the nightstand. The Gideon Bible had been hollowed out. Inside, a mirror, cracked, and behind it, a photograph, black and white, water-stained. It was him, standing in the lobby, but the date at the bottom read October 17, 1939. In the background, the woman from the front desk hadn't aged a day. He confronted her the next morning. She smiled kindly.
We all come back, Mr. Harper.
You'll remember soon.
He ran to the 4th floor, key 4 in hand. The door opened with a groan.
Inside, everything was covered in white sheets, furniture, mirrors, walls. The air was thick with dust
And the smell of mildew.
On the bed lay a guest ledger, older, fragile. He opened it, the same names as before, but scratched out violently. All except the last one. Caleb Harper, October 17, 1939.
He turned to leave. The door was gone.
Only wallpaper.
Seamless. Then he saw it. A mirror uncovered in the corner.
He was dressed in 1930s clothing. Dust on his shoulders. The reflection smiled back, but he hadn't moved.
Now, the inn remains.
Guests come when the road disappears behind them.
When the storm doesn't end.
When their name appears in a book they don't remember signing.
Room 4A is always vacant.
Until it isn't. And every morning, the woman at the front desk greets the new guest with the same question.
Checking in, Mr. Harper. Story 8. The last bell of Stonefield. Stonefield wasn't on any road signs.
Marla only found it by mistake after missing her highway exit in a storm. Her GPS died.
Her phone refused to load.
By the time she realized she was lost, the town had already gathered around her like a bad dream for choked streets, wooden houses leaning together like conspirators, and a strange quietness, not silence.
Held breath.
She passed no cars, no lights in windows, and yet the streets weren't empty.
Figures stood beneath eaves and porches, faces pale still, watching.
She should have kept driving, but something slowed her. The fog, the narrowing road,
The strange tug behind her eyes.
She stopped when she reached the old church in the center of town.
Its bell tower was leaning, the bell itself black with rust.
One door creaked open on its own. She went inside, looking for help, directions, a foe. The pews were all facing the wrong way, not toward the altar, but toward the entrance, as if waiting. On the floor lay a bell rope, frayed and ancient, trailing into a dark hole where the floorboards had rotted. A book sat nearby, open to a page titled The Tolling List. The names were handwritten,
Neatly, but old. Yellowed.
a column of dates.
Everyone crossed out except the last.
Marla Vanish didn't remember signing anything.
But it was her handwriting.
She ran, back into the town. The people on the streets didn't move, but their heads turned as she passed, slowly, synchronized. Each window she passed now bore a candle. Each face a name murmured as she approached.
She drove until the tires screamed, but the road went back, turned in on itself. No matter which way she turned, the bell tower rose again before her.
Waiting. Night fell. She stayed in the car, engine off, in the dark. She heard footsteps.
Outside, then above, then inside, though the doors were locked.
The bell rang once.
And in a sound, she saw a memory that wasn't hers. Stonefield, green and thriving. People in black robes ringing the bell at dusk.
A child taken from a home.
A mother screaming. Then darkness again. Her ears rang long after the toll.
The next morning, the town was alive. People sweeping their porches, hanging laundry, nodding at her as if she'd always lived there.
No one mentioned the night before. When she approached the church, the bell was whole, clean,
cold bright in the sun.
Inside, the book sat open. Her name was now crossed out.
Beneath it, in the same hand, a new name. TBSH. She tried to leave. This time, the road led her out, smooth, direct, as if it had never vanished. She didn't stop until she was 2 towns away, in a diner, shaking, trying to explain to a waitress where she'd come from. The waitress blinked.
Stonefield. She leaned closer.
You made it out?
Then you know. We all return when the bell calls. It always finds the next name.
Marla never went home.
But some nights, when the wind is still and heavy, she hears a bell toll, distant,
from nowhere.
And her name, whispered one more time. Story 9. The Lantern in Hollow Creek. Hollow Creek was a place people warned each other about, mostly in hushed tones.
Not for the usual reasons of crime or nature, but because of the lantern. Jessie first heard about it on a rainy evening in the rundown bar where the locals gathered, voices low and wary. You see it, the lantern.
Only shows when the fog's thick, said one man, tapping his glass nervously. Follows you till it don't.
Jessie, a photographer chasing abandoned places, was skeptical, but when his car sputtered her stop near Hollow Creek on his way to the next town, he had no choice but to walk the final mile through the mist. The air was thick, soaked with rain and cold, and the forest around seemed to lean in. The creek itself was barely visible, a silver ribbon swallowed in fog.
Then, in the distance, he saw it, a faint glow bobbing between the trees, a lantern.
Old-fashioned, swinging gently, casting dancing shadows that didn't quite match the movement of the branches. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a slow heartbeat through the fog. Jessie followed, camera ready. The lantern never got closer, never further.
It just stayed in view, always just out of reach.
After an hour, the fog thickened, and Jessie realized he had walked in circles. The trees looked the same, gnarled roots curling like fingers, slick with rain. And behind him, he heard footsteps, soft but uneven. The lantern dimmed, then vanished. Jessie froze. The footsteps stopped.
He spun around.
Nothing. When he turned back, the creek was there, dark, slow, swallowing fallen leaves and mud. But the lantern was gone.
Shaken, he made his way back to the road.
That night, in the cheap motel, Jessie reviewed his photos.
The last few shots showed the lantern clearly,
but in every image, in the reflection of the glass, a shadowy figure appeared. Not human, tall, thin, faceless. The photos began to change. Each time he looked away and back, the figure moved closer.
Then, in one image, the figure was standing directly behind him.
Jessie couldn't sleep.
He kept hearing a faint tapping at the window,
a soft, rhythmic sound like a lantern swinging on its hook. He checked outside. Nothing but the rain. The next morning, Jessie's car wouldn't start.
He called for help, but the signal was gone. The town seemed to hold its breath. He decided to walk back through the woods, this time avoiding the creek.
But the path wasn't clear. Branches snagged at his jacket. The ground was soft and sinking. The footsteps returned, slow and now measured. The lantern glowed again, flickering between trees. This time, Jessie didn't follow. He ran. Weeks later, a local found Jessie's camera by the roadside. The memory card was intact. No photos, only a recording. The audio played faint, distorted whispers. Wait for the light.
Don't look back. And then silence.
No one has seen Jessie since. But some say, on foggy nights near Hollow Creek, a lantern swings silently in the mist. And if you listen close enough, you can hear footsteps following, waiting,
Story 10. Whispering Pines.
For years, Ellie had escaped the cabin deep in the Whispering Pines forest whenever the city noise became too much. It was her refuge, a place untouched, quiet, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to breathe with the wind. This visit started like any other. The rain was steady and soft, pattering against the roof in a rhythm that promised calm. But the forest had changed. The silence between the raindrops was heavier. The trees stood still. On the first night, Ellie awoke to soft sounds outside, a faint whispering, like voices carried on the wind, too low to understand.
She told herself it was just the forest settling, the way branches rub together in the rain.
But the whispers continued, growing clearer over the next days.
She tried to dismiss them, focusing on her journal, her sketches.
One evening, she found a small, carved wooden figure near the back door. Not hers.
Delicately shaped, a figure cloaked in a hood, face hidden.
She dropped it inside.
The whispering grew persistent.
Words at the edge of hearing.
Come find us. She began to notice footprints in the soft earth outside, small, too small for an adult.
No one had visited the cabin, yet something watched. On the third day, the power flickered. Ellie lit candles and sat by the window. In the dim light, she saw movement in the trees. Figures, children. They never stepped forward. They only watched. From the edges of vision, pale faces flickering like ghosts. One night, the whispering became a voice. The woods remember. The lost are never gone.
Ellie found herself drawn to the forest.
A path that hadn't been there before stretched out before her, lined with broken branches and crushed leaves. She followed. Deep in the woods, she found an old cemetery.
Headstones worn and half sunk.
Names she recognized from local history children who disappeared decades ago. Among them, fresh soil, a freshly carved stone. Her name.
She ran back to the cabin.
The whispering followed. Inside, the wooden figure waited on the floor. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows.
Ellie packed hurriedly.
As she left, the trees seemed to lean closer. The whispers faded, but never stopped. Back in the city, the rain never felt the same.
At night, Ellie hears the faintest whisper on the wind.
A reminder
that some places never let you go.
And the forest in Whispering Pines is still waiting.
Story 11. The Hollow House. Eli moved to the outskirts of Marrowbrook to escape the noise of the city, a quiet town with peeling paint and shuttered windows, where even the rain seemed reluctant to fall. He bought an old farmhouse that had sat empty for decades.
The kind of place locals avoided, speaking in hurried whispers about why the last family left in a hurry. The first day, the house greeted him with silence.
No creaks, no settling noises, just a stillness so complete it felt unnatural.
That night, Eli dreamed of the house's past.
A family at dinner, laughter that echoed faintly like a radio playing in another room.
A little girl chasing fireflies in the yard, but the faces were blurred, the laughter distorted.
He woke with a start, the rain tapping steadily against the window.
Days passed. The house seemed to breathe. Doors closed slowly behind him. Footsteps echoed faintly from empty rooms. In the kitchen, he found a dusty photograph of a family smiling, frozen in time. On the back, a message scrawled in shaky handwriting. We are still here. One evening, Eli heard whispering, soft voices coming from the attic. He climbed the narrow stairs, heart pounding. No one, only a cracked mirror reflecting a room that wasn't their child's room, with a rocking chair moving slowly back and forth. He started to lose time. Moments vanished.
He'd find notes he didn't write.
Names carved into the walls. The little girl's laughter followed him, always just out of reach.
The townsfolk warned him to leave. They spoke of the house's curse, a family trapped between worlds.
Voices who never found rest. Eli tried to escape, but the house held him tight.
The final entry in his journal reads,
They watch from the shadows. The house remembers.
And it wants me to stay. The hollow house stands empty again.
The rain falls steadily, and sometimes, if you listen close, you can hear the rocking chair creak in the attic, waiting.
Story 12. The Watcher at Fen Hollow.
Miles away from the nearest town, Fen Hollow was a swampy, tangled place the locals avoided.
A land of stagnant water, twisted trees, and a kind of silence that feels like eyes watching from beneath the surface.
Lena was drawn there for the solitude, a writer struggling with her next novel. She rented a small cabin on the edge of the fen. The rain had soaked the land for days, turning the paths to mud and making the air thick with mist. The first night, Lena heard something moving outside, slow, deliberate, just beyond the reach of the porch light. Something big, watching.
She told herself it was an animal.
Maybe a deer, but the feeling of being watched stayed. Each day, the fen seemed to shift around her. Paths she had walked the day before no longer led anywhere familiar. The trees seemed to lean in, their branches like skeletal fingers. Her phone had no signal. At dusk, she noticed something else. Eyes, glowing faintly from the water. Not just one pair, but dozens, watching her, waiting. One evening, the rain turned heavier.
Lena spotted a figure standing motionless at the fence edge.
Tall, thin, draped in dripping black. No face, just darkness. She blinked, and it was gone. Sleep evaded her. The whispers began low, unintelligible. The cabin creaked. Shadows danced just beyond the candlelight. One morning, Lena woke to find strange symbols carved into the cabin door. They seemed to move when she wasn't looking. A warning or a mark. She tried to leave, but the fen swallowed the road. The figure returned at night, closer, watching. Now, the locals say the fen takes what it wants, that those who wander too far never come back. And sometimes, on rainy nights, you can see a flicker of black by the water's edge, watching, waiting. Story 13. The silence beneath. For years, Thomas had been drawn to the abandoned mines outside of Eldridge. The old town scars, gouged into the earth and left to rot. Whispered secrets he couldn't resist. The rain hammered the landscape as he made his way to the entrance, slick rocks and rusted beams warning against entry. But Thomas was chasing a story,
An echo of something lost.
Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. His flashlight cut through the darkness in narrow beams. The walls seemed to close in, pressing with a weight heavier than stone. He found strange symbols carved into the wall, circles overlapping, lines like roots twisting underground. A journal lay half buried in the dirt, pages brittle and stained. It spoke of a voice beneath the earth, a silence that wasn't silence.
As Thomas ventured deeper, the air grew colder, the whispers louder.
At first, barely audible, then clear, words in a language he couldn't understand, but that filled his mind with dread. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A low hum rose from the depths. The shadows twisted. Figures emerged, not quite human, eyes like pits of nothingness. Thomas tried to run, but the tunnel shifted. The exit was gone, replaced by darkness that swallowed the light. He heard a voice, not outside, not in the air, but inside his head. Stay outside. The rain continued to fall. The mind remained silent. But sometimes, at night, the townsfolk hear the faintest sound. A whisper from below, calling, waiting.
Story 14. The window at Grey Hollow.
Grey Hollow was a forgotten village swallowed by forest and fog. Most maps skipped it entirely, but Samuel had reasons to visit an old family estate, long abandoned, left to rot beneath tangled vines and cracked glass. The rain was relentless when he arrived, muffling the world and blurring the outlines of the skeletal houses. The house was dark, its windows like hollow eyes staring back. Samuel found a study and sat by the only intact window. Outside, the forest pressed in, leaves dripping and shadows flickering. He heard whispers too soft to make out. At night, the rain drummed louder, and the window began to fog from inside. Shapes moved just beyond the glass. First, distant figures, pale and still, then closer, their faces pressed against the glass, eyes hollow, mouths open in silent screams. Samuel tried to leave. The door wouldn't budge. The house seemed to breathe, contracting walls and creaking floorboards. He was trapped with the watchers. Days blurred. The whispers grew louder, sometimes calling his name. Memories he didn't recognize surfaced, family secrets, betrayals he never lived. In the forked window, he saw a reflection that wasn't his own. A pale man with hollow eyes, smiling. The last journal entry found in the house reads, "The watchers never leave, and neither will I. Grey Hollow remains hidden, shrouded in rain and fog.
The window glows faintly at night.
And if you stand close enough, you might hear the whispers, waiting peep.
Story 15. Echoes of Ashwood Asylum.
The Ashwood Asylum loomed on the hill, long abandoned, its windows shattered like broken eyes staring down at the town.
Rain poured endlessly that day as Mark crossed the threshold, driven by morbid curiosity and a promise to document the forgotten. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay, the scent of rust and stale memories. His footsteps echoed down the long corridors, past peeling walls and faded murals.
The silence pressed in, broken only by the soft drip of water from a cracked pipe.
Mark found a patient's journal, stained and torn.
Entries spoke of voices calling from the wall, of shadows moving just beyond sight, of a constant, unbearable silence that screamed. As the day faded, the asylum seemed to breathe, doors creaking open, shadows lengthening. Mark heard whispers, faint at first, growing clearer. "Join us, don't leave." In the basement, he discovered a sealed room.
Inside, rows of empty beds and restraints, a wall covered in names scratched, bleeding through the paint.
One name stood out. His. The rain outside intensified.
Mark's mind frayed.
The whispers turned to screams.
Faces appeared in the broken glass, pleading, accusing.
The last transmission from Mark's camera was static. Then a chilling whisper. "Ashwood never forgets. The asylum waits. Under the rain, under the silence, waiting for the next visitor."
Story 16. The Forgotten Crossroads.
No one spoke about the crossroads beyond Millfield. Travellers avoided it, and locals crossed themselves when passing by. Rain poured steadily as Nathan arrived, seeking shelter from a storm and answers to a mystery long buried. The crossroads were deserted, framed by cracked signs pointing in impossible directions, names of towns that didn't exist anymore. Nathan found a small diner nearby. The bell above the door jingled softly, but inside was a stillness unlike any other. The few patrons sat motionless, eyes fixed ahead. They didn't speak. He asked for directions.
No response.
The air felt thick, suffocating. Outside, the rain muffled all sound. That night, Nathan stayed at a rundown motel. From his window, he watched shadows move on the empty streets. Figures appeared and vanished without a sound. He discovered an old newspaper clippings book in the motel lobby.
Stories of disappearances, strange lights, and a curse tied to the crossroads.
Names matched some of the frozen faces he'd seen. Each morning, the town seemed unchanged. No one aged, no one left. The crossroads beckoned. Nathan followed the one path beyond the town limits.
There, in the rain-soaked earth, he saw footprints his own, leading into the mist.
The last page of his journal was smeared with rain, words written hastily.
They're watching from the crossroads.
Time doesn't move here, and neither do I. The crossroads remain, lost in the rain, waiting.
Story 17. The Light That Never Dies.
The rain hammered against the cliffs as Mara climbed the winding path to the old lighthouse. It had been decommissioned for decades, but she'd heard whispers of its light still glowing on stormy nights, an impossible beacon guiding no ships.
Mara was drawn to it, chasing stories of lost sailors and ghostly keepers.
Inside, the air smelled of salt and rust. The spiral stairs creaked beneath her feet. At the top, the lantern room was empty, no light, no lens. Yet through the rain-streaked windows, a faint glow pulsed rhythmically. She waited. The light blinked once, twice, then vanished. In the silence, she heard footsteps behind her, slow, heavy. Turning, she saw nothing but shadows shifting in the hall. The door slammed shut. The rain outside thickened, drowning out all sound. Night fell, and the lighthouse seemed to breathe. A low hum filled the room. Mara's phone flickered, showing images of the sea waves crashing, a ship lost in a storm.
Whispers seeped through the walls.
"Don't leave. The light calls." She tried the stairs. They twisted endlessly. The walls closed in. The glow returned now brighter, burning in her eyes. The last message she sent was a single word. Trapped. The lighthouse stands still, its light flickering in the storm, waiting for the next soul drawn by its call.
Story 18. Fork over Eldermore. Evan arrived in Eldamore just as the rain began to ease.
The village lay nestled in a valley, swallowed by a dense fog that never quite lifted.
Locals moved like shadows through the mist, eyes worried, voices low.
Evan sought the village for answers. His sister had vanished nearby months ago, and this was the last place she was seen. The fog clung to everything, softening edges and swallowing sounds. Paths twisted impossibly, and no matter which way Evan turned, the church steeple always loomed just out of reach. At the inn, he met a woman who whispered of the grey veil, a fog that trapped souls between worlds.
She warned him not to follow the voices calling through the mist. That night, Evan awoke to soft singing drifting through the fog outside.
A child's lullaby, sweet and haunting. Drawn, he stepped into the fog. The village shifted. Buildings shimmered and faded.
Figures appeared, pale and translucent.
They reached out, mouths moving in silent pleas.
Evan's footsteps led him to an ancient well. From its depths came a cold wind, whispering his sister's name.
He peered inside, but saw only darkness. He tried to run, but the fog thickened, wrapping around him like hands.
His breath came in ragged gasps. The voices grew louder. Stay with us.
Forever. The next morning, the fog had lifted. Eldamore was empty. No sign of Evan.
Only the echo of a lullaby lingering in the damp air. Story 19. The Lost Voices of Raven's End. The rain never seemed to stop at Raven's End.
The village was small, forgotten, and tucked beneath towering cliffs that loomed like silent sentinels. When Claire arrived, she was looking for solitude, but what she found was something far darker. The villagers spoke little, eyes glazed as if caught in a distant dream.
They warned Claire not to wander after sunset, but curiosity pulled her toward the cliffs, where a narrow path led down to a crumbling pier.
At twilight, she heard voices carried on the wind, soft, mournful, calling her name. They came from the sea. The pier was slick with rain and seaweed. Claire's footsteps echoed as she walked to the edge. A faint glow shimmered beneath the waves. Shapes swirled just beneath the surface faces, mouths open in silent screams.
That night, the voices followed her into sleep,
whispering secrets she couldn't understand.
Memories that weren't hers.
Days passed, and Claire felt herself slipping.
Her reflection blurred, her thoughts tangled.
The village grew quieter, the rain heavier. On the last evening, the villagers gathered by the cliffs, staring out to sea. Claire joined them. Together, they watched as pale figures rose from the water, lost souls seeking release.
But the sea claimed them again.
When morning came, Claire was gone. The villagers said the rain had taken her, and if you stand on the pier at night, you can hear her voice faint, calling out.
Story 20. Beneath the willow.
The old willow tree stood at the edge of the abandoned cemetery, its branches drooping like mourners cloaked in shadow.
Rain fell in a steady, soft rhythm, soaking the cracked tombstones and the earth beneath. Mara had come to the cemetery seeking answers. Her grandmother had whispered of a secret buried beneath the willow, something that could not be forgotten. The air was thick with damp and decay. Footsteps echoed on the wet grass, but Mara was alone.
She traced her fingers over weathered names, feeling the weight of years pressing down. Beneath the willow, the ground was soft.
She dug carefully, rain washing away the soil, revealing a small wooden box, ancient and bound with rusted iron. Inside, a faded diary. The diary told of a woman named Eliza, who vanished one stormy night. Her words spoke of a shadow that followed her, a presence beneath the willow that whispered promises in the rain.
That night, Mara heard it too, soft whispers curling through the willow's branches.
Stay with me, don't leave. The ground trembled faintly beneath her feet.
Sleep escaped her. The willow's branches scraped like claws against the window.
Mara felt watched. At dawn, the willow stood silent, but beneath its roots, something stirred.
The diary lay open, and the whispers never stopped.
The rain continues outside, steady and endless.
The willow waits.
Story 21. The room with no corners. It was supposed to be a short-term rental, a countryside house far from the city, nestled among pines that dripped with rain and silence. Iris wanted quiet, a place to mourn without reminders.
The ad had promised peaceful solitude. She didn't notice the room until the third day. There was no door to it, just a sudden opening in the hallway that hadn't been there before.
It was empty, featureless.
Walls the color of bone.
No furniture, no sound, and no corners.
The walls curved into each other smoothly, a strange, seamless geometry that made her dizzy to look at. She asked the owner.
They swore the house had no such room. At night, the room was darker than the rest of the house. Rain ticked on the windows, but no drops touched the strange, smooth floor. She felt drawn to it, like gravity bent inward at that threshold. The moment she stepped inside, the world became quieter to quiet. No wind, no heartbeat, no breath. She only stayed in it for seconds at first, but she began waking up closer to it.
Once on the floor inside, then came the voices. Not loud, not immediate, just murmurs, like someone pacing behind the walls, reciting something over and over. Sometimes the voice was her own. Sometimes it was her daughter's. She tried to record it. The playback was only static and rain.
One morning, she found pictures on her phone she hadn't taken. All of the room, angles that couldn't exist. One showed her sleeping in it, though she never remembered closing her eyes.
She packed to leave. The hallway stretched. The door disappeared. There was only the room now.
Its walls beginning to pulse, as if breathing. She screamed into the silence. The room inhaled,
and the corners never came.
Locals say the house is abandoned now, though lights flicker in the upper windows when it rains.
Sometimes a voice calls from behind the trees, always the same question. Have you seen the room with no corners?